Before you judge me, let me tell you how I got here. On my 62nd birthday, I thought I was going out to lunch. I wore my best sweater and even did my hair. But instead of cake and laughter, I was handed a suitcase and abandoned. That was just the beginning. If you think betrayal only comes from strangers, wait until it wears your last name. Stick around till the end and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. They say a mother's love is unconditional, that it's patient, forgiving, and eternal. I believed that. I lived that. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every school play, I was there for Brandon, my only son. I woke up on my birthday with a flutter in my chest, that familiar warmth of anticipation. 62, alone in my modest house in Dayton, Ohio, but hopeful. Brandon hadn't called much lately, said work was hectic, that things with his wife were tense, but surely, he'd show up today. I made pancakes, his favorite, even set 2 plates. By noon, I was still alone. My heart sunk a little, but I refused to spiral. I checked my phone a dozen times, reread old texts just to feel some connection. At PM, the doorbell rang. I opened it to see Brandon, standing there with that boyish grin he used to wear when he wanted something. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, holding a small grocery store bouquet. I smiled through the sting in my chest and hugged him tight. "You came." "Of course," he said, patting my back stiffly. "Get dressed. I made lunch reservations." I didn't even question it. I grabbed my coat, a little purse, slid on the shoes that always pinched my toes but looked nice. I felt giddy, like a girl going to prom, but we didn't drive toward the city or any restaurant. We pulled into a place with a long driveway lined with maple trees whose leaves had turned to ash gold and red. I looked up at the sign and felt my stomach twist. Willow Pines Senior Living Facility. "Brandon, what is this?" He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk. This isn't safe anymore. You live alone and with your memory lapses." "What memory lapses?" I snapped. He kept talking. "I found a great place. It's safe, comfortable. You'll have people your age, activities." I laughed. That bitter kind of laugh that doesn't feel like laughing at all. "You're kidding. You brought me here." "On my birthday?" He got out of the car. "Let's go inside." I refused to move. That's when he opened the trunk. My suitcase was already packed. I stared at it, frozen. "You went through my things?" He sighed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Inside, it felt like time had stopped. Smiling faces at reception, the smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables. He handed over papers, legal papers, a transfer of power of attorney. My name, his signature. Done. I didn't cry then, not yet. I let them lead me to a room with beige walls, an adjustable bed, and a small window facing a brick wall. My birthday gift. I sat on the edge of the bed with my coat still on, feeling the cold seep through my bones. No cake, no candles, just silence. Hours passed. I finally opened the bouquet. It had wilted from the car ride. The flowers looked like I felt. That night, I lay awake, listening to the quiet rustle of nurses, the distant sound of a TV somewhere down the hall. The mattress was too firm. The sheets smelled like bleach. I replayed every conversation with Brandon over the past year, trying to see the signs I'd missed. I thought of all the times I said yes when I should have said no. The times I covered for him, loaned him money, made excuses to others. The moments I swallowed disappointment because I loved him. But that night, I stopped defending him. Something cracked inside me. Something essential. The next morning, I asked a nurse for my cell phone. She said my son had taken care of it, disabled the line, said it was too confusing for me. It was then I realized I wasn't here to be cared for. I was here to be erased, and if I didn't find a way out, they'd succeed. But I'm not as fragile as they think, not even close. I stopped eating for 2 days, not because I was trying to make a statement, but because I simply couldn't stomach the food, or the truth. There's something about being treated like you're no longer useful that breaks a part of you that never fully heals. I'd raised a child, built a home, loved fiercely, and now I was just a room number and a patient chart. The nurses were kind, mostly, but kindness can feel like a form of pity when you're trapped. They called me sweetheart and Han, like I was 10 or 100. No one asked what I did before. No one asked what I loved. To them, I was just another old woman wearing slippers and forgetting things. Even if I hadn't forgotten a damn thing, My roommate Doris slept all day and snored all night. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it was about people who hadn't visited her in years. I listened, because I knew the ache of absence too well. I tried to keep my mind sharp. I watched the news in the common room and did the crossword puzzles they left in the hallway. I reread a novel I'd already read twice before. But something inside me was sinking, deeper, darker. Then, on the fourth day, I met Ruby. She wasn't supposed to work that day. A nurse called in sick, and Ruby, young, with braids pinned up under her scrub cap and kindness in her eyes, filled in. She was checking my vitals when she said, "You don't belong here." I looked at her, startled. She smiled. "Don't get me wrong. A lot of folks need help, and that's okay. But you don't seem lost." I blinked away the sudden sting in my eyes. We got to talking. She asked about Brandon. I told her what I could without falling apart. She listened, not just nodded, really listened. Later that day, she came back with something in her hand. "This belonged to Mr. Henley, a resident who passed last week," she whispered. "We found it tucked inside a Bible. No one claimed it. It was a lottery ticket, folded, a little yellowed, and dated 2 weeks earlier." I chuckled, dry and brittle. "And you want me to try my luck?" She winked. "Hey, the world owes you something." I didn't plan to do it. Not at first. It felt silly. But boredom and desperation are strange bedfellows. That night, I waited until the hallway was quiet, used one of the facility's ancient desktops in the lounge, and typed in the numbers. My hand froze. My eyes scanned the page again and again. Is million. I covered my mouth with both hands. I looked around. No one was there. The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't joy I felt, not at all. It was fear, pure, electric fear. If Brandon found out, if anyone found out, I printed the confirmation, folded it small, and tucked it inside my bra. The next day, I called Ruby aside. "I need to talk to someone, privately. Someone legal." She didn't ask why. She just nodded. Ruby knew someone, a volunteer attorney who came by twice a month to help seniors with wills and such. I waited, with my heart pounding, until he arrived that Friday. His name was Aaron, young, sharp, and most importantly, discreet. We sat in the tiny break room. I slid him the lottery confirmation and whispered, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows rose, but he didn't flinch. "We'll need to move fast," he said. The next hours were a blur. Paperwork, notarizations, financial transfers, a new phone, a temporary mailing address. He contacted an independent financial advisor who set up a blind trust. My name was nowhere visible. Brandon would never see a cent. I signed a new will, leaving everything to charity, just not yet disclosed. Brandon had already signed away my life once. I wouldn't let him do it again. Ruby hugged me on the night I left. "Don't forget us when you're free," she whispered. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I slipped away just before dawn, wearing clothes that weren't mine, carrying a duffel with only the essentials. They thought I was senile, broken, alone, but I was about to become a ghost with $1 million. Let them look for me. They'd never see me coming. The bus ride out of Ohio was long, quiet, and cold. I sat near the back, hood up, sunglasses on, clutching that duffel like it held my soul. In many ways, it did. I didn't know exactly where I was going. All I knew was that I had to get far enough that no one could find me. Not Brandon, not his wife, not the lawyers he'd likely already called. Aaron had helped me purchase a modest house under a new trust name in rural Tennessee. Something off the grid, but livable. No cameras, no neighbors too close, just enough distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. When we crossed the Kentucky border, I exhaled for the first time in hours. Freedom had a taste, and it wasn't sweet. It was metallic, like blood and fear. The house was nothing fancy. A single-story brick structure with chipped paint and a crooked mailbox. But it had a working heater, clean water, and, most importantly, silence. Not the kind you get in a nursing home, surrounded by people who've given up. This was the kind of silence that let you breathe. The next few days, I lived like a shadow. I cooked simple meals, walked to the mailbox, sat on the porch, wrapped in an old quilt watching the wind carry dead leaves across the yard. I checked the news obsessively, half expecting my name to appear in bold letters. Missing woman wins, $1 million. Son claims mental instability. But there was nothing. Not yet. I kept the lottery ticket in a fireproof box under the floorboard in the hallway closet. Alongside it, the new will, a burner phone, and a note addressed to whomever finds this, just in case. One morning, about a week after I left Willow Pines, the quiet shattered. A knock at the door. I froze. I hadn't told a soul where I was. I didn't even have a credit card linked to my name. My heart beat like a war drum in my chest. I tiptoed to the window and peeked. Just a delivery man. Groceries. Part of the arrangement Aaron had set up. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. That afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I created a fake Facebook profile and searched for Brandon. There he was, smiling in his profile picture like the world hadn't fallen apart. In his latest post, he wrote, "If anyone has seen my mother, Margaret Taylor, please contact me or the Dayton police. She's been missing for several days. We're worried about her safety." Beneath it, hundreds of comments poured in. Prayers, condolences, people praising Brandon for being such a good son. I laughed so hard I cried. Oh, they had no idea. None. But what truly broke me wasn't the post. It was the photo he used. It wasn't recent. It was from 5 years ago. One of the last birthdays we celebrated together. I had a sparkly party hat on, and he had his arm around me. We looked happy. How easy it is to perform love in pictures. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room staring at the fireplace. My thoughts went in circles, and the longer I sat with them, the darker they became. I remembered every time I'd given Brandon money, every loan, every lie. I remembered how he gaslit me, subtly but enough. He'd say things like, "You told me that already," when I hadn't, or, "You're forgetting more and more these days." I thought I was aging poorly. I thought it was my fault. It wasn't. He wanted me to doubt myself, so when he took control of my life, I wouldn't resist. Well, I was done being controlled. The next morning, I called Aaron from a burner number. "I need you to update my will again," I said. He didn't ask why. "What changes? I want to make it very clear. Brandon Taylor receives absolutely nothing. Not a dollar, not a keepsake, not a memory." "Done," he said. "You're safe now, Margaret." But I wasn't. Not yet, because deep down I knew something was coming, and I needed to be ready for it. It started with a letter, plain envelope, no return address, tucked in among utility bills and junk mail. I wouldn't have noticed it if not for the paper, heavier than usual. Expensive. My stomach turned the second I touched it. Inside was a single sheet, a photocopy, my signature, or what looked like it. Below it, 2 others, one from my late husband Richard and another from Brandon. It was a loan document dated 12 years ago, a $, personal loan taken out in both Richard's and my names. The bank's logo was real, so was the notary stamp, but I'd never signed that paper. Never. I sat down on the worn sofa, the letter trembling in my hands. The document had my handwriting, down to the loop in the G of Margaret, but something about it was off, too clean, too practiced. My husband would never have hidden a loan like that. And Brandon? He never said a word. I pulled out the fireproof box, retrieved the older file folder Aaron had helped me compile, a collection of past financial documents we salvaged before I left. Inside, I found 3 more forms, all with my forged signature. A cold realization slithered through me. Brandon had been stealing from me and Richard for years. It explained the strange tension in our final years together, the way Richard avoided certain financial topics, how we suddenly had less, how Brandon always seemed to need money for an emergency, but drove a newer car every year. The quiet arguments at night I thought were about work, the canceled vacation plans, the bad investments. I'd blamed aging, the market, a general turn of luck. But it was Brandon. All along, I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I opened my laptop and began digging deeper. Over the next 3 days, I pieced it all together. Brandon had falsified several loan documents using Richard's social security number and mine. The amounts varied. $, here, $, there. Some were paid off. Others had been quietly rolled into debt collections. Richard must have covered most of it before he died, taking the shame with him. But one account, still active, showed a ballooning balance of over $, and it had defaulted under my name just 3 months before I was dropped at Willow Pines. I sat in the darkness of that little Tennessee living room, screen glowing in front of me, hands clenched so tight my knuckles ached. This wasn't just betrayal. This was theft, fraud, criminal. I reached out to Aaron again. "I have new information," I told him. forged documents, loans. Brandon did it. I believe you, he said calmly. Do you want to press charges? Not yet. I wasn't ready. Not because I had doubts. No, those were gone. I wasn't ready because I wanted him to feel the fear first, the silence, the not knowing. I wanted him to wonder if I knew. Because the truth was, I wasn't hiding anymore. I was hunting. I began gathering every document I could, every account tied to my name, every old email, every financial notice Brandon once sent on my behalf. I even contacted the old bank we used and requested records under a legal pretext Aaron helped me draft. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed, and what it revealed made my blood run cold. Brandon had taken out a high-interest loan against the small business I once co-founded with Richard back in the 80s, a catering venture we ran from our garage in those early years. He used that LLC, still technically active, to secure a doubler's line of credit. He signed it using Richard's name, 2 years after Richard had died. That wasn't just a moral failing. That was federal fraud. I saved everything to an encrypted folder, backed it up, and printed a copy to store in the box beneath the floorboards. I wasn't sure how long I had, because if Brandon was as desperate as I suspected, and if he had even the slightest clue that I had vanished with millions, he'd be coming for me. Soon. Have you ever looked at someone you loved your entire life and realized you never truly knew them? That's what it felt like. Scrolling through pages of documents that tied my son to a trail of deceit so long and tangled, it made my stomach churn. The man I once rocked to sleep in my arms had grown into a stranger, and not just any stranger, a dangerous one. By now, I had confirmed everything. Brandon had forged my signature, lied to banks, manipulated my late husband into covering for him. And worst of all, he had done it all behind the mask of a devoted son. But the darkest truth came through a simple search. Buried in a public database, with a little help from Aaron's access, I found it. Brandon Taylor, currently under federal investigation for fraudulent tax filings, embezzlement and identity misuse. Identity misuse. That one hit hardest. I clicked on the case file, trembling. The details were mostly redacted, but the accusations were clear. Brandon had been creating false identities, inflating incomes, falsifying deductions, and submitting returns to siphon money through refunds. Some of those identities were deceased, some were elderly, some were real people, including me. The IRS had flagged several returns filed in my name over the past 3 years. I had no idea. I stared at the screen, my mind in a spiral. Had he planned to take my money from the beginning? Was this the reason he was so quick to shove me into a facility and shut down my phone? It wasn't concern. It was containment. He wanted to keep me silent, disoriented, and out of the way. I pushed back from the desk, pacing the narrow living room, one hand on my chest to quiet the tremors. My own son had weaponized my identity, used my name as a tool for his schemes, and when the heat came down, he'd planned to put me away like a loose end in a messy story. Only now, I wasn't just a loose end. I was the one holding the thread. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every lie, every loan, every forged line on a piece of paper. I printed them, filed them in manila folders, labeled them with dates. I began recording audio notes, not because I was scared of forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to be the last one in the room if anything happened to me. Then, I made a choice. I mailed a copy of the entire file anonymously to the Department of Justice. Not to make a statement, not yet, but to plant a seed. They'd have the evidence. If something ever happened to me, they'd know where to look. Still, I couldn't stop the feeling that he knew. I started noticing cars parked longer than usual near the house. Once, a man knocked on the door claiming he was doing a survey of the neighborhood. I didn't open it, just watched from behind the curtain, phone in hand. Every knock, every ring, made me jump. And still, I didn't run. Not this time. I made another call to Aaron. We need to finalize the trust, I told him. The will too. I want everything protected. He agreed. We set it all up in my new name, with layers of legal insulation. If Brandon ever tried to claim a cent, he'd be bounced out of every court in the country. But as much as I tried to shield myself with paper and strategy, the emotional blow hit in the quietest moments. I'd sit at night and remember Brandon as a boy, his laugh, his scraped knees, the way he used to fall asleep on my chest. I'd remember the teenage years, when things got harder, but I never gave up on him. The college calls, the sudden silences, the growing distance. How did I miss it? How long had he been slipping away while I kept holding on? Maybe that's the worst kind of betrayal, the one you watch unfold in slow motion, always hoping it's something else. But now I knew, and I wasn't going to let him rewrite the end of my story, because for the first time in my life, I held the pen. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address, but the moment I saw the handwriting, I knew. Brandon had always written in sharp, slanted strokes, as if even his pen couldn't wait to be done with whatever he was doing. Inside was a single sentence. I know what you did, and this isn't over. I read it twice, 3 times. Then I laughed, not out of amusement, but because it was the exact kind of arrogance I expected from him. No, I miss you. No, where are you? Just a warning, or a threat. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into my growing folder of evidence. By now, I'd been gone almost 3 weeks. Brandon had launched what looked like a public campaign of concern, begging for information, giving interviews to local news stations, playing the role of the heartbroken son searching for his confused and vulnerable mother. It would have been comical if it weren't so chilling. And then, just as I feared, he made his move. A letter arrived from the county courthouse in Dayton. Official. Certified. I signed for it with trembling hands and sat down to open it at the kitchen table. He had filed a petition to have me declared mentally incapacitated. I couldn't breathe. The document included statements from 2 people claiming I'd shown erratic and confused behavior over the past year. One was a former neighbor. The other, his old college friend. Someone I barely knew. Brandon's lawyer had submitted audio clips too. Snippets of old voicemails I'd left when I was distressed, lonely, or simply venting. Chopped and edited, they made me sound unwell, unstable. He even attached a letter from a psychiatrist, one I'd never met, claiming concern over my disappearing and paranoid behavior. They wanted the court to freeze my accounts, to seize control of the trust, to drag me back. I felt like the air had been punched from my lungs. Aaron came that same night. He read everything, his expression unreadable. "We've got work to do," he finally said. "But Margaret, you need to be calm. You need to stay sharp. They're counting on panic." I nodded, too numb to cry. The next few days moved like a storm. Aaron contacted an experienced litigator to help us prepare. We gathered documents, video calls, financial logs, even a dated journal to prove I had been of sound mind every day since I left. We scheduled an independent psychiatric evaluation. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Levine, came to the house and spent 3 hours with me. She asked about my childhood, my late husband, Brandon. I told her everything. She didn't pity me. She listened. She asked real questions. And when she left, she touched my hand and said, "You're the most lucid person I've seen this week." It felt like the first breath I'd taken in days. Still, the pressure mounted. News of the hearing leaked. The internet, which had briefly sympathized with Brandon's missing mother saga, began to shift. Questions arose. Why hadn't I contacted anyone? Was I unstable? Was someone else pulling the strings? The media loves a mystery, and Brandon knew how to feed them one. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because now I had more than just proof. I had purpose. In the quiet of my small home, I began preparing a video statement. I didn't publish it yet, but I wanted to be ready, just in case they silenced me. I looked into the camera and said, "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am of sound mind, and I was betrayed by the person I trusted most." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just told the truth, because I knew what was coming. And this time, I wouldn't be the one on trial. The courthouse in Dayton hadn't changed since the last time I'd passed through it, years ago, when I paid a parking ticket and sat in a room full of people hoping to forget their mistakes. Back then, I was a wife, a mother, someone who believed in giving people second chances. Now, I was the accused. Aaron had advised me to dress simple but strong, something that said, "I'm not here to beg. I'm here to be heard." I wore a navy blue coat with silver buttons, my husband's old watch, and a pair of sensible heels that clicked defiantly with each step through the courthouse halls. Brandon was already seated at the front of the courtroom when I arrived. He stood as I entered, like a perfect performance. A mask of concern draped over his face. He even offered a smile, the kind that strangers would interpret as warmth, but I saw it for what it was. He was here to bury me. The judge, an older man with tired eyes, introduced the case. In the matter of Margaret Taylor's mental competency, the words hung in the air like smoke. Brandon's attorney went first, a tall man with a polished voice and too much confidence. He laid it out like a script. Margaret had gone missing. Margaret was behaving erratically. Margaret was possibly being manipulated. Margaret was a danger to herself and her finances. He introduced the psychiatrist's letter, the one from the doctor I'd never met, and presented those audio clips of me, edited and spliced like a horror reel. I listened to myself sound scattered, desperate, even unstable, taken completely out of context. I saw the judge's eyebrows rise, my hands clenched around the armrest. Then, Brandon spoke. "Your Honor," he said, voice trembling just the right amount, "I love my mother. I really do. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I believe she's being taken advantage of. She's not herself. She's lost." That's when I stood. "My turn, Your Honor?" The judge nodded. I walked slowly to the stand, pausing just enough to let the weight of my presence settle. Then I spoke. "My name is Margaret Taylor. I am 62 years old. I am not mentally impaired. I am not lost, and I am not anyone's victim." I opened my folder, methodically, carefully, and handed a copy of Dr. Levine's full psychiatric report to the judge, signed, dated, and certified. The verdict: completely sound mind, no indicators of cognitive decline, emotionally stable. I watched the attorney's shoulders tense. Brandon's face twitched. Then I continued. "I have here," I said, lifting a second folder, "a log of every phone call I made the week before I left, receipts for the transfer of funds to a legal trust, medical records, clean, and a signed affidavit from the attorney who helped me exit the facility, stating I was lucid, logical, and in full control of my decisions." I paused. "And I also have something else, but I won't be presenting that today, not unless I need to." I didn't show the file, the one with every fraudulent signature, every stolen loan, every manipulated tax document Brandon ever touched. That was my ace. Instead, I turned to the judge. He put me in a facility without my consent, took my phone, took my freedom, and now he wants to take what little I have left, my voice, my independence, my dignity. Don't let him. The courtroom was still. Aaron sat beside me, silent but steady. His eyes met mine, proud but not surprised. The judge leaned back, thumb tapping the file. "I need time to review all documents and the medical evaluation. The court will reconvene in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. Brandon turned toward me as the session ended. He tried to catch my eye, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. He left the courtroom with clenched fists and a jaw set tight. His mask was cracking. And I walked out with my head high. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I knew I could win it. 2 weeks. That's how long the judge gave us. But Brandon didn't waste a single day. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, he doubled down on his public campaign. The local news ran a new segment. Missing mother reappears in court. Son fears exploitation. Brandon spoke directly to the camera, eyes moist, voice shaking just enough. "I just want to make sure my mother is safe," he said. "She's been through a lot. She's not thinking clearly. And I'm afraid there are people around her with bad intentions." I watched the broadcast from my living room, arms folded, jaw tight. There were no bad people around me. Just me. Just Margaret Taylor, the woman who raised him, who sacrificed, who forgave more than any mother should. And he had the audacity to paint me as a puppet? That was the moment I knew. The silent war I had declared in my heart was no longer enough. I needed to act. I called Aaron and asked him to come by. When he arrived, I handed him the sealed envelope with every document I had collected. The fraudulent loans, the forged signatures, the tax returns Brandon had filed under my name. "Send it," I said, "not to the court, to the Department of Justice, anonymously." He opened the envelope, flipped through the pages and nodded. This will get their attention. I'm counting on it. But I wasn't done. That night, using one of my new aliases and a fresh online account, I made a sizable donation, $5 million, to a national nonprofit organization that protects elderly individuals from financial abuse. No name attached, just the transfer. Within a week, they launched a campaign using my case as a symbol. They didn't name me, but the timing was too perfect. People started whispering, sharing, questioning. How does a mother vanish, then reappear with money, but her own son tries to lock her away? Comments flooded social media. Something's off with the son. Let her speak. Why hasn't anyone asked her side? I don't trust him. Brandon's carefully constructed image began to wobble. Then, a break I hadn't expected. A journalist from a major newspaper reached out to Erin. She wanted to hear my side of the story. She promised discretion, no names, no photos, just truth. I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe 2 towns over. I wore sunglasses and a hat. We sat in the corner booth. She hit record and let me talk. I told her about the facility, about being dropped there without warning, about Brandon taking my phone, my accounts, my dignity. I didn't mention the lottery, not yet. When she asked about the court case, I simply said, "He's trying to take control of my life." Again, the story ran 2 days later. Mother or millionaire? The silencing of Margaret T. It didn't take long for the dots to connect. People online began speculating. Was the missing mother actually the anonymous donor? Was this why her son wanted her declared incompetent? More whispers, more doubts, and still, I remained quiet. Because Brandon's downfall wouldn't come from an accusation. It would come from a reckoning. 2 days before the court reconvened, Erin received a call. It was from the Department of Justice. They had received our anonymous file, and they were opening a case. Brandon didn't know it yet, but while he was building a castle of lies in courtrooms and cameras, I was setting fire to the foundation, and the flames were getting higher. The second hearing felt colder, not because of the weather, though the Tennessee wind had turned cruel that week, but because something had shifted in the air around us. Brandon walked into the courtroom looking less confident this time. His shoulders weren't quite as high. His lawyer whispered urgently as they took their seats. They'd seen the article. They'd seen the shift online. They were feeling the cracks. I sat calmly, my folder of documents neatly tucked into my lap. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. Not the kind of anger that lashes out, but the kind that sharpens into precision. This time, we went first. Erin opened with a statement that silenced the courtroom. "Your Honor," he began, "since the last hearing, we've completed a full independent psychiatric evaluation, submitted detailed financial logs proving Mrs. Taylor's independence and coherence, and have discovered, through legitimate public records, that the petitioner, Mr. Brandon Taylor, is currently under federal investigation for multiple financial crimes, including identity misuse and tax fraud." He handed the judge a copy of the public case docket. Brandon's attorney stood up, immediately protesting. "That investigation has no bearing on—" The judge held up a hand. "Sit down." The courtroom held its breath. Then came the real blow. Dr. Levine, my independent evaluator, took the stand. Calm, intelligent, direct. She confirmed that I was not only mentally competent, but emotionally sound and fully aware of my decisions, including my choice to leave the nursing home. "She's not only clear," Dr. Levine said. "She's deliberate, thoughtful. There is no medical basis for any declaration of incompetence." I looked at Brandon then. His hands were gripping the table so tightly, his knuckles were white. His mask, that carefully constructed facade of concern, was unraveling by the second. Erin then presented our final piece of evidence, a timeline. It showed exactly when Brandon attempted to seize control of my accounts, and how that perfectly coincided with large withdrawals he made from his own failing business. Coincidence? Hardly. The judge reviewed everything in silence. Brandon was offered the opportunity to respond. He stood. His voice cracked. "My mother is sick. She's clearly being manipulated by someone. She wouldn't act like this unless she was confused or unstable. This isn't her." I stood then, and I faced him directly. "I am her," I said. Everyone went still. "I am the woman who stayed up with you when you had the flu at age 6, who gave up vacations, who pawned jewelry to pay for your college classes, who cooked your favorite meal even when I couldn't afford groceries for myself. I am her, and you left me in a facility like I was nothing." I turned to the judge. "And now, Your Honor, I ask you to let me prove that I am not nothing." The judge leaned forward, steepled his fingers, and spoke slowly. "Mrs. Taylor, based on the overwhelming evidence provided, your psychiatric evaluation, and the inconsistencies in the petitioner's claims, I am dismissing this case. Your financial accounts and personal autonomy are fully restored. This court recognizes you as competent and independent. I didn't cry, but my hands trembled slightly as I picked up my papers and walked out of the courtroom. Brandon didn't say a word as I passed. His eyes were wild, not with anger, with fear. He knew it was over, at least this part. But what he didn't know was that while he'd spent weeks trying to prove I was unstable, I'd been building something far more powerful than a defense, a legacy, and I wasn't done yet. The phone call came just after midnight. Aaron's voice was tense but steady. It happened. The DOJ opened formal proceedings. Brandon's name is on the docket. I didn't speak. I just sat there, in the dark, staring out at the wind shifting the trees beyond my window. A part of me had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had come, it didn't feel victorious. It felt inevitable. The next morning, the world caught up. The media swarmed it first. Brandon Taylor, son of recently spotlighted elder abuse case, under federal investigation. My name wasn't mentioned. Not directly, but the dots were too close not to connect. People remembered. The missing mother, the court battle, the anonymous donor, the frail woman who disappeared but stood strong in court weeks later. Now, their perfect son was unraveling, and they wanted to hear from me. I stayed quiet for 2 days, turned off the TV, ignored the phone. I cooked myself breakfast, watched the birds peck at the frostbitten yard, sat with a pen in hand and wrote letters I never intended to send. But silence wasn't justice. It was time. I reached out to Sarah, the journalist who had met me in secret weeks earlier. I told her I was ready to speak, this time on camera. No aliases, no more shadows. We scheduled the interview for the following Friday. National news, full feature. She asked if I was sure. I've never been more sure, I said. The day of the interview, I dressed simply. Gray sweater, small silver earrings, no makeup, no stylist, just truth. We sat across from each other in a quiet studio, the lights soft and warm. Sarah leaned forward. Margaret, the world knows the headlines. They've read about Brandon, about the case, but what they don't know is the heart of it. Why now? I looked directly into the camera. Because it's not just about me, I said. It's about every parent who gave everything and was thrown away. Every older adult dismissed, erased, or locked up under the excuse of love. I was almost one of them, and I won't be quiet anymore. Then I told my story. The nursing home, the lottery ticket, the lies I uncovered, the file I sent. I left out nothing. Sarah's eyes welled as I spoke, but I didn't cry. I was done crying. That night, the interview aired. Millions watched. Messages poured in. People from across the country, sharing their own stories of betrayal, abandonment, and survival. I wasn't just Margaret anymore. I was a mirror. Brandon didn't speak publicly, but sources close to him said he was devastated, that his life was falling apart. Good. He built that life on manipulation, and now it was collapsing under the weight of his own cruelty. But I didn't gloat. Instead, I got to work. I made plans to launch a foundation, one that would protect elders from legal and financial abuse. Not in name only, but with real legal support, real funding, real advocacy. I named it the Margaret Project, because if they were going to use my name to strip me of dignity, I was going to use it to give dignity back. Still, the pain lingered. Not because Brandon was suffering, but because I had once loved him with a kind of loyalty that blinded me. And now I had to learn how to live without that illusion. But I had something better now. I had the truth, and no one could take that from me again. Brandon's arrest didn't come with sirens. It came with headlines. Brandon Taylor indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and tax evasion. I read the news on a quiet morning with my tea in hand, and my cat curled beside me. The house was still, except for the steady hum of the refrigerator and the wind brushing against the shutters. For a long time, I just stared at the article. Not because I didn't believe it. I did. But because I had imagined this moment so many times that, when it finally came, it almost felt like déjà vu. He was out on bond, of course. Money can buy time, even when it can't buy peace. But the damage was done. His name had become synonymous with betrayal. Former clients pulled their business. His credit lines were frozen. Friends? Gone. Even his wife had issued a statement through a lawyer. She was filing for divorce. He was alone now. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was hollow. The thing about surviving betrayal is that it doesn't leave you whole. It leaves you wiser. Yes, sharper, stronger maybe, but something soft dies in you. That blind trust, that belief that love is enough to keep someone loyal. I didn't grieve that softness. I buried it. It was a chilly Saturday when I walked into the town center for the first time since the interview aired. People recognized me. They didn't whisper. They didn't stare. They smiled. One woman, maybe in her 40s, touched my arm and said, "You gave my mom courage to leave a bad situation." A young man behind the pharmacy counter slipped a note into my prescription bag. "My grandma says thank you." I didn't seek this attention, but it came gently, like sunlight through heavy clouds. Aaron stopped by that afternoon. "They offered him a deal," he said. 10 years if he pleads guilty. If not, it goes to trial. "And he?" I asked, still pretending it's all some misunderstanding. "He thinks he can outsmart the system." I shook my head. "He's been pretending his whole life." Aaron hesitated. "He still hasn't tried to contact you?" I met his eyes, not directly, but I had received something. A letter, unmarked envelope, slid under my front door one evening while I was in the kitchen. Inside, a photograph. It was from my 60th birthday. Me, in a yellow sweater, laughing with cake on my face. Brandon beside me, holding the knife, laughing too. On the back, just one sentence in his handwriting. "You always believed in me." I'm sorry that wasn't enough. I sat with that photo for hours, not crying, not raging, just remembering. Remembering the boy who asked for one more bedtime story. The teenager who drove my car into a mailbox and cried when I didn't yell. The man who hugged me tighter than usual the day his father died. They were all parts of him, and I loved them. But love, true love, demands truth. And Brandon chose lies. That night, I burned the photo in the fireplace. Not out of hate, out of release. I watched the flames curl around the paper, blacken the edges, erase the smile. I didn't need a picture to remember. I needed peace, and I was almost there. The morning I returned to Willow Pines, the sky was pale gray, the kind that softens the world without hiding it. I stood outside the facility for a long moment, staring at the very place where I'd been left like luggage. The parking lot was quiet. The trees were bare. But something had changed. The front doors opened, and Ruby stepped out before I could knock. She gasped when she saw me. "Oh my God, Margaret!" I smiled. "It's me." We hugged, not politely, not briefly, but like two people who had both survived something. Her arms were warm, and I realized how long it had been since I'd felt safe in someone's embrace. Inside, the place looked different. The floors were freshly waxed. The lights were brighter. The common room had new books, a better television, and real coffee brewing in the corner. "I heard what you did," Ruby said, leading me to a quiet bench in the hallway. "The donations, the interviews. Margaret, you changed everything." "No," I said. "I just stopped letting people decide who I was." We walked the halls together. I visited Doris's old room. It was now a reading lounge. The staff looked up, some smiling, some stunned. A few residents recognized me. I nodded to each of them. They weren't invisible anymore, and neither was I. That afternoon, I gave a speech in the new activities room. There were folding chairs set up, and the staff had made cookies. Ruby introduced me like I was someone famous, but I shook my head. "I'm not here because I'm rich," I began. "And I'm not here because I was wronged. I'm here because I was silenced. And I know how many of you still feel that way." Every pair of eyes watched me. Some welled with tears. "I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago," I said. "You are not a burden. You are not forgotten, and you are not finished." Applause followed, soft at first, then louder. I smiled, feeling the weight of every lonely night I had ever spent, now replaced by something warmer, something full. When I returned home, I finalized the trust. The Margaret Project would become a national organization, offering legal and financial advocacy for elders in danger of being exploited. We'd hire attorneys, launch hotlines, build partnerships with senior care facilities and courts. Brandon? He took the deal. 10 years. He tried to send another letter. I returned it unopened. That chapter was closed. I spent the final days of the year writing letters to every person who helped me. Aaron, Ruby, even Dr. Levine. I thanked them not for saving me, but for standing beside me while I saved myself. And then, on the first snow of January, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I wrote a letter to myself. It was short, just one page. I read it aloud as I sat by the fireplace, the cat curled at my feet. Dear Margaret, you weren't crazy. You weren't too trusting. You weren't weak. You were just a woman who loved too deeply. And when they tried to write you out of your own life, you picked up the pen and wrote the ending yourself. I am so proud of you. With love, yourself. I folded the letter, placed it in a small wooden box, and set it on the mantel. I didn't need a legacy of money or revenge or even justice. I had something greater. Freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was finally, fully, completely free. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.